it's Mrs. Scanlon again. Last week we were talking about fiction stories, and you were supposed to be reading a fiction text and retelling the characters, setting, problem, and solution. This week we're going to continue talking about fiction text. Remember, fiction is a made-up story that is not real. This week, I don't want to talk about all the story elements. I want to really dive in and talk more about characters. Remember, characters in a fiction story can be people, creatures, and animals in a story. When you think about who the story is mostly about, we call that the main character. Here are some characters you might recognize from some of your favorite stories. We have Pete the Cat, Junie B. Jones, and Fly Guy. Let's talk about character traits. Character traits are words that describe how a character looks, acts, or feels in a story. Here's a little character you might recognize from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. He's pretty grumpy today, so I would describe him with the word grumpy. This little boy is sticking out his tongue. He's kind of silly, or I might call him naughty. When somebody loves and is good at sports, we might consider them athletic. Here I have the characters Frog and Toad is delivering a cake. I could say he is a thoughtful character. I'm going to be reading to you a fiction story called Where the Wild Things Are. While I'm reading, I want you to think, who is the main character? And when we're done reading, I'm going to ask you to think of some character traits to describe that main character.
Where the Wild Things Are. Stories and Pictures by Maurice Sendak. Where the Wild Things Are. The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind and another. His mother called him Wild Thing, and Max said, "I'll eat you up." So he was sent to bed without eating anything. That very night in Max's room, a forest grew. And grew. And grew until his ceiling hung with vines and the walls became the world all around. And an ocean tumbled by with a private boat for Max, and he sailed off through night and day. And in and out of weeks, and almost over a year, to where the wild things are. And when he came to the place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible roars, and gnashed their terrible teeth, and rolled their terrible eyes, and showed their terrible claws. Till Max said, "Be still," and tamed them with the magic trick of staring into all their yellow eyes without blinking once, and they were frightened and called him the most wild thing of all, and made him king of all wild things. "And now," cried Max, "let the wild rumpus start." "Now stop," Max said, and sent the wild things off to bed without their supper. And Max, the king of all wild things, was lonely and wanted to be where someone loved him best of all. Then, all around, from far away, across the world, he smelt good things to eat. So he gave up being king of where the wild things are. But the wild things cried, "Oh, please don't go. We'll eat you up. We love you so." And Max said, "No." The wild things roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. But Max stepped into his private boat and waved goodbye. And sailed back over a year and in and out of weeks and through a day. And into the night of his very own room, where he found his supper waiting for him. And it was still hot.
While you were listening to the story, I was hoping that you were thinking about who the main character of the story was. If you were thinking Max, you were right. I took Max's name and I put him in the middle of the web. And then while I was listening to the story, I thought of some character traits that could describe Max. The first word that came to my head was wild. In the beginning of the story, he was crazy, running around the house and getting in trouble. When somebody's in trouble and is mischievous, we could call them naughty. So that's another word I thought of. When I was listening, I also thought, wow, he was in trouble and in his room, but he took himself to another place. He was creative when he thought of all that imaginary land of where the wild things were. So I put the word creative. When he was in that land of wild things, they named him King because he was telling them what to do and he was very authoritative. Somebody who is bossy could be called assertive. They know what they want and they tell others exactly what they mean. Another word that I thought of was when he was in that land, he was playing with the creatures. He was dancing. He was swinging on vines. He was having a great time. So he's a fun person to be around and he can be very silly. I'm going to tell you an activity you can do at home with the story you read.
Here is a web that you could create with the character traits from a story that you read at home. I used mine to do the character traits of our buddy Max from Where the Wild Things Are. Here in the center, I wrote the main character's name. But then as you can see, the boxes around have those same words that we just were brainstorming. Naughty, creative, silly, assertive, lonely, wild. After you get done thinking about character traits, this is a challenge for you. This sheet asks you to pick one of the character traits that you selected for the character. Provide evidence from the text to support the character trait. So here I wrote the word naughty again, but then I had to tell where in the text did it show me that he was naughty. I have to prove it. So over here I wrote, Max was naughty when he chased the dog with a fork. Assertive. Max was assertive when he told the wild things, no. Boys and girls, I can't wait to see what fiction books you read and see your web. Have fun. See you soon.